ChatGPT de NOI. Have you ever trusted someone to watch over your children? What if the babysitter you hired wasn't just untrustworthy, but truly terrifying? In this video, I'll share 2 chilling babysitting horror stories that reveal how dangerous the people you trust with your loved ones can be. These aren't just tales, they're stark reminders of how perilously close we can be to unimaginable danger when we least expect it. The night was heavy in the small suburban neighborhood. Everything seemed normal, from the outside: quiet streets, manicured lawns, the occasional dog barking in the distance. But there was something off about the house that stood at the far end of the block. It had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember, its windows covered in layers of grime, casting the house in a perpetual gloom, even during the brightest of days. Tonight, however, the faintest light seemed to emanate from within, making the house look even more unnerving. A 15-year-old girl named Emily stood at the foot of the crumbling porch, her breath visible in the cool evening air. She held a small, tarnished key in her trembling hand, the key to the house that she was about to enter. The same house she had been hired to babysit in for the night, without knowing anything about the dark history that lurked within. She had been eager to take the job. It was close to her school, and the extra money would be helpful for her family. The woman who had called her about the job, Mrs. Adams, had seemed kind enough on the phone, though there was an edge of nervousness in her voice. "It's just for the night," she had said. "The kids are well behaved, and you'll be safe." But standing before the house now, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She had walked past it every day for the past few weeks, never giving it more than a passing glance. But tonight, for the first time, she felt like something was terribly wrong. The door creaked ominously as Emily turned the key, the sound of the old wood groaning in protest. She pushed the door open, stepping cautiously inside. The air was thick with dust and neglect. The faint smell of something musty hung in the air, mixing with a deeper, more pungent odor that Emily couldn't quite place. Her shoes echoed on the wooden floor as she stepped into the house, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, the house was unnervingly still. The living room was dimly lit by a few flickering candles, their flames dancing erratically in the draft that swept through the house. The furniture was old, covered in dusty sheets, as though abandoned in haste. But it was the silence that unnerved her the most. No sounds of footsteps, no chatter, not even the murmur of a television. Just silence, oppressive, suffocating silence. Emily's gaze drifted to the children, who sat motionless on the couch. There were 3 of them. The oldest, a girl about 10, stared blankly ahead, her expression vacant. The middle child, a boy, was fiddling nervously with his hands, his eyes darting around as if he was expecting something. The youngest, barely 7, sat on the floor, playing with what looked like a tiny matchstick. Something about their eyes felt wrong, lifeless, almost hollow. They weren't the innocent, curious eyes of children. There was a coldness in them, a detachment, like they weren't fully present in this world. Emily swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Hi, I'm Emily. I'm here to watch you for the night." The children didn't respond. Instead, they just stared at her with those strange, unblinking eyes. "Are you all right?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She stepped closer, kneeling down next to the youngest. His hand was trembling slightly, and he seemed to be staring at the matchstick in his hand with a strange intensity. His fingers twitched, and Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Hey, put that down," she said softly, trying to reach for the match. But he pulled his hand away, a twisted smile creeping across his face. Suddenly, a door slammed open, making Emily jump. She turned sharply, her breath caught in her throat. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered. He wore a dark suit, his face hidden in the shadows cast by the dim light. His presence was commanding, almost suffocating. Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was something menacing about him, something that made her stomach churn. He didn't speak, but his gaze was enough. The way his eyes narrowed when they met hers, cold and calculating. It was as if he was sizing her up, like a predator observing its prey. He stepped into the room, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The children's faces remained unchanged, as if they weren't even aware of his presence. Emily took a step back, instinctively clutching the edge of the couch. The man didn't look at her again. Instead, he walked past, his steps heavy and deliberate. He didn't make a sound as he passed by her, but his presence filled the room like an unseen storm. She could feel his eyes on her, even though he didn't speak. The air felt thick with tension, suffocating. Emily didn't know why, but she had an overwhelming urge to leave. But she couldn't, not yet. She had a job to do. The man had already walked into the kitchen, leaving her alone with the strange children. Minutes passed like hours. Emily tried to focus on the children, but the weight of the man's presence lingered in the air. His absence in the room felt like a storm waiting to break, the calm before something terrible happened. She had heard of dangerous people before, but this man felt different, like he was something darker, something far more dangerous than anything she could have imagined. When the phone rang, Emily nearly jumped out of her skin. She rushed to answer it, grateful for the distraction. It was Mrs. Adams. "Emily," she said, her voice strained. "There's been a change of plans. You need to leave. Now. Just leave. I'll explain later." Confused, Emily glanced around. The children were still in the same positions, but something about the air had shifted. The man, the father, was nowhere to be seen. Had he gone to bed? Or was something else going on? "Why? What's wrong?" she asked, her voice shaking. "There's no time," Mrs. Adams replied quickly. "Just get out of there, now." Emily didn't question it further. She grabbed her bag and rushed to the door, not once looking back at the children, who remained eerily still. As she stepped outside, a cold breeze bit at her skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep in her bones. The next morning, Emily returned to the house to pick up her payment. She had hoped for some sense of closure, but instead, she was met with an even more horrifying revelation. The moment she stepped inside, Mrs. Adams, who had been unusually quiet, handed her a folded envelope. "Listen, Emily," Mrs. Adams began, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know what kind of man he really was, what he was capable of." Emily's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Your employer, the father," Mrs. Adams continued, her voice trembling. "He's been arrested. The police found him in connection with several murders. He used to stalk young girls who looked like you. I didn't know. He never showed it, but I should have known." Emily felt her legs go weak. Her hands trembled as she dropped the envelope to the floor. The image of the man's cold eyes flashed in her mind, and she realized just how close she had come to something unthinkable. The children had known, they had always known. They had been watching her, and they had never been innocent. They had been pawns in a game far darker than she could comprehend. She stumbled backward, her mind struggling to make sense of what had just been said. She had been inches away from death. The killer had been right there, lurking in the shadows, and she had never even noticed. As she stood in the doorway, the world seemed to blur around her. She had been so close, too close. And for the first time, Emily understood the true meaning of fear. The room felt suffocatingly quiet, the air thick with the stillness that only a forgotten house could possess. Dust lingered in the corners, untouched for years, and the low, flickering light from a small desk lamp cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. The furniture, though functional, had an air of abandonment to it, as if time had passed it by, leaving it to decay in the corner of someone else's forgotten life. A grown woman sat alone in the corner of the room, her back straight, yet her posture was rigid, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. Her hands, nervously clasped in her lap, trembled slightly. Her face was serene, yet her dark, soulful eyes betrayed her calm exterior. They stared out at nothing in particular, focused on the emptiness in front of her. There was something in her expression, a silent anguish that threatened to overwhelm her. It was a grief that had never truly left her. The room around her was heavy with memories, memories that refused to die, no matter how hard she tried to bury them. It was as though the house itself was haunted by the ghosts of her past. Her childhood. Her innocence. Everything had been taken from her, piece by piece, leaving her with nothing but the empty void of forgotten nightmares. Her name was Isabel. She had grown up in that house, and yet, it felt foreign to her now. Her parents had long since moved away, leaving the house behind, but Isabel had never been able to escape the memories. No matter where she went, they always followed. They haunted her dreams. They haunted her waking moments. And tonight, the ghosts of her past had come back to visit her once more. Her eyes wandered around the room, and a wave of nostalgia, dark and suffocating, washed over her. The memories began to flood her mind, like a torrent that she couldn't stop, no matter how much she tried. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to push them away, but they refused to be ignored. The faces, the sounds, the coldness. They were all there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to return. She remembered the winter nights, the endless, bone-chilling cold that crept into her bones and made her feel as if she were slowly dying. It had been late, far too late for a child to be left outside alone. But there she was, sitting on the cold porch, her body trembling with the cold, her small hands rubbing her arms in a futile attempt to warm herself. She could feel the bitter winter wind slicing through her thin coat, its icy fingers digging deep into her skin. She had been left out there, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to care for her, with no explanation, no reason why. Inside the house, she could hear the laughter of the other children. They were warm, safe, comfortable. But not her. She was always left out. Always alone. And as the hours passed, as the cold seeped deeper into her body, she wondered if anyone would ever come for her. But there was always the strange game, the game that seemed to haunt her memories. The nanny loved to play it, a game that, in hindsight, was anything but innocent. "Turn off the lights," the nanny would say with a wicked grin, her eyes gleaming with something Isabel couldn't quite place, something sinister. "Hide and seek. But this time, you must find me before the lights come back on." It wasn't the kind of game a child should play. It wasn't fun. It wasn't playful. It was something far darker. The nanny would turn off the lights, leaving them all in complete darkness. The house would fall silent, and Isabel would be left alone in the shadows, her breath quickening, her heart pounding as she stumbled through the dark, trying to find the woman who was supposed to take care of her. But the woman wasn't just hiding. No. The nanny was always watching, waiting, as if she enjoyed the fear it caused. Isabel could feel her eyes, even in the darkness. It was the most unsettling feeling, like a presence that loomed just beyond the edge of her vision. One night, everything changed. The lights went out, and Isabel did her best to search for the nanny, her tiny feet pattering across the old floorboards. She had searched the entire house, the darkness so thick that it felt suffocating. But she couldn't find the nanny. And then, just when she thought the game was over, she heard a sound, soft, almost imperceptible. It came from under the bed. Isabel froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't want to look, but something drew her closer. Slowly, she knelt down, her fingers trembling as she reached out for the edge of the bed. And then she saw it. Two hollow eyes stared back at her from beneath the bed, wide open, unblinking. The rest of the face was lost in the darkness, but the eyes were like nothing she had ever seen. They were cold, empty, lifeless, like the eyes of a creature that had long since given up on humanity. Isabel gasped, stepping back in terror. And there, beneath the bed, was the nanny, her face pale, her body contorted in an unnatural position. Her mouth curled into a twisted, grotesque smile. It was a smile that didn't belong. It was the kind of smile that chilled you to the bone. The nanny didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The smile alone was enough to freeze Isabel in place. She stood there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to scream. All she could do was stare at the woman who had once been tasked with watching over her, the woman who was now nothing more than a nightmare. The woman's laughter echoed in the darkness, a sound that would haunt Isabel for the rest of her life. It was a sound that carried the weight of years of fear, of isolation, of twisted games played in the shadows. The years passed, and Isabel grew older. But the memories never faded. They never truly left her. She carried them with her, a burden that weighed heavily on her heart. She moved away from the house, away from the place where the worst of her memories had been born. But no matter where she went, no matter how far she tried to run, the memories always followed. She had tried to forget. She had tried to move on. But there was always that nagging feeling, that sense of something dark, something unfinished, lingering just beneath the surface. And so, many years later, Isabel sat in the same room where she had spent so many sleepless nights, staring into the void. She had never confronted her past, never spoken of it to anyone. But tonight, the truth had come rushing back, and it came in the form of a single question. Who hired the nanny? Isabel had asked her mother once, years ago, about the nanny, about the strange game, about everything that had haunted her for so long. But her mother had always been silent. The question had always gone unanswered. But tonight, Isabel demanded the truth. And when her mother finally spoke, the words chilled her to her very core. I never hired anyone to watch you, her mother said, her voice shaking with an unsettling fear. Isabel stared at her mother, disbelief washing over her. The woman who had raised her, the woman who had loved her, had never hired the nanny. The nanny wasn't a hired help. She wasn't part of the family. She had simply appeared, a presence that had taken root in their home, a darkness that had never truly been explained. And then, Isabel's younger brother spoke up. He had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, but now he revealed something that shattered everything Isabel thought she knew. I remember something, he said, his voice trembling. I remember things you've forgotten. And with those words, everything changed. Isabel listened as her brother recounted memories of things she had long since buried, things that she had blocked out, things that had been hidden deep in the recesses of her mind. And the more he spoke, the more she realized just how much she had forgotten. Things she had tried so hard to forget. The nanny wasn't just a figment of her imagination. She had been real. The games, the twisted laughter, the eyes staring out from beneath the bed, it had all been real. And the worst part was that Isabel couldn't remember everything. She couldn't remember the worst of it. The memories were like fragments of a shattered mirror, scattered and distorted, but they were slowly coming together. And as they did, Isabel began to see the truth, the horrifying truth that had been buried for so long. The nanny hadn't been hired. She had come into their lives for a reason, and that reason was far darker than anything Isabel could have ever imagined. The wind howled outside the house, the sound rattling the windows as Isabel sat in the darkness, surrounded by the ghosts of her past. She had never truly escaped. The nightmare had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to come back. And now, it was too late.